Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Beitzah daf Chav Zayin. We are going to begin on Chav Zayin about 6 lines from the top. In yesterday's daf, we were speaking about the din of a bechor, a firstborn animal. A person is not allowed to shecht unless it develops a mum. And even if you look at the mum and you're pretty confident that it's not a temporary one, you have to have a mumcha, an expert, to actually say that this is in fact a mum. And once it's a mum kavua, then you can shecht it on Yom Tov. So we're discussing whether or not a person is allowed to have your animal examined on Yom Tov, which in fact is a machlokas, as we're going to now continue to see. Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya Habile Hahu Buchra. So he had a bechor, and he wanted to make sure that it had in fact a mum, and since it had a mum, he would have it examined, and then he'd be able to shecht it on Yom Tov. Shadru l'kemed Rav Ami, Sabar Deloy l'mersi. So Rav Ami decided that he was not going to evaluate this animal because he felt that you're not allowed to do this on Yom Tov, which is a machlokas. So Emily Reb Zreika v'item Reb Yirmiyah, Reb Yehuda Rav Shimon halach Reb Yehuda. When it comes to the machlokas Reb Yehuda Rav Shimon, we paskin like Reb Yehuda that a person should be allowed and is allowed to examine an animal on Yom Tov. So why is he passing like Reb Shimon? Well, he should be holding like Reb Yehuda that you're allowed to. So Hader Shadul Kamei Rav Yitzchak Nafcha was sent in front of Yitzchak Nafcha. Savar Dul Mechsi. Again, he also didn't want to examine it. So Amalei Rav Yirmiyah V'Item Rav Zreika Rav Yehuda Rav Shimon Rav Yehuda. Again, the question is, why are people so apprehensive to evaluate these animals to see if it has a mum on Yom Tov? L'chayr we pass like Rabbi Yehuda that you're allowed to. So Amar Rabbi Abba, my taima lo yishav katin hu rabbanan lamevid uvduk Rav Shimon. So the question is, what is this whole reason? Why are you not passing like the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, and instead you're passing halacha like the shita of like Rav Shimon? So why are you doing this? So Amalei the atma biyadach. He says, and you, what's in your hand? Says Rashi, the shakas of Rabbi Yehuda. Why are you so confident that we should paskin like the shita of Rabbi Yehuda and not go like the shita of Rav Shimon? Amalei hachi am Rav Zera halacha k'Rav Shimon. In fact, Rav Zera says the halacha is like Rav Shimon, and therefore you're not supposed to examine. So Amar man duhu aski v'askil hasam. The person who v'zaycha to go from there and be able to say this sugya over kisal kahasam when he actually went up over there to that location. Ashkei Rav Zera, he found Rav Zera because he wanted to find out. In fact, that is what Rav Zera said. Did Rav Zera actually say that the halacha is like Rav Shimon, that you're not supposed to examine these animals of Bechor and Yom Tov? Sharmalei Amar Mar halacha Rav Shimon. Armalei, is it true that you said that? Armalei, lo, na mistaber amri. I just figured out through logic. Meditani b'masnisin Rav Shimon Omer kol she'ein mumo niker meboid yom ein zemen muchen. He says that anything that has not been pre-examined from before Yom Tov is not considered to be muchen. But katani lo b'Beitzah b'lashon chachamim, and they were quoted in the language of the chachamim. So must be Shema Minam Mistaber Kavase, that we talk a paskin like the Shifter Rav Shimon. And therefore, since it wasn't examined on Erev Yom Tov, now that you want to examine on Yom Tov, you can't do that. So my Havala. So what is the maskana? What do we paskin? So Omer Rav Yosef Tashma, the Tali Ba'ashle Ravavi, that which is hanging by very, very big ropes. So as Rashi Chavalim Gedolim, the Gasim, very thick ropes. Says, what does that mean, thick ropes? Chachamim gedolim amrua. Some great people said this, and therefore I can't go against their words, and therefore I have to paskin the Yomi of Shimon ben Pazi, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul, Rabbi Mishum Kahal Kedisha Shebrishalayim. What did these great individuals say? Rav Shimon v'chaverav Amr halacha. Rav Shimon v'chaverav Amr halacha k'Rav Meir. He said that the halacha is like Rav Meir. Says Rashi, "B'v'charos hashna mashma shemeidin kihil kedisha al Rav Shimon ben Manasseh she'omer Oid davar zeh. He said other things. Mafarish Rav Yosef Amru bitmia b'chi esher b'kal kedisha Amrim davar zeh. Al Rav Shimon Manasya v'chavera of Amr halachik Rameir yavdin and kavasayu. The halacha is like Rameir, and we will do like him. So if we go back to our Mishnah, Yehuda said that Yord Mumcha v'yireh, that you can go and take this animal up. However, Rav Shimon said, as we said, that you're not allowed to do so, and it's totally on whether or not you could examine this animal on Yom Tov. So l'chayra, this is the what we're saying. So Amru va'inhu kashishimine, but they are older than him, tuva by much. El b'shitas Rameir amrua, but rather in the shita of Rameir it was said, Nan ha'sheichet es ha'bachor. The person shechts a firstborn animal. V'yachach heres mumoi, and then only afterwards he showed the mum to a mumche. Rabbi Yehuda matei Rameir oimer hoyel v'nishchat shloi al pi mumche. Since you shechted it without an expert seeing it first, aser alma ksav Rameir rias bachor lav ki rias treifa. We see that the examining of a bechor is not like a treifa. Why? Rias bechor mechayim. Rias treifa l'machar. L'achar shchita. Why treifa? You want to examine its lungs, for example. So you examine it after the shchita. However, when it comes to a bechor, we consider it to have the chazak of being a tam until it's examined. So when you shecht it as a tam, it cannot be examined. It has to be examined before it was shechted. Umina. And we can derive from here. Rias treifa fil b'yomtiv. We know that you can examine a treifa even on Yom Tov, because again you want to make sure you could eat it. Rias b'chor erev Yom Tov. And when it comes to examining b'chor, it's on erev Yom Tov. So again, we see that this connection. Says Rashi, "V'hayu talav ashli Rabbi." These are the big ropes. Shomer kahala kedisha deharav Shimon karameir ozli pasel karameir. The Kamlu Rav Shimon ben Yochai, Rav Shimon, Rameir b'chad shitasa. They hold the same thing. B'hab Rabbi Yehuda Yachid, they debar shel echad b'makam shnayim. So you have Rav Shimon who says the same thing as Rav Meir, that we don't compare the dinim of the treifa to the dinim of shchita, and therefore just like the bechor, you have to make sure that it is examined first, and then only afterwards should it be shechted. So too. The bechor should only be seen on erev Yom Tov and not before. Amalei Abaya ought to what? Hasam b'royin bumin kimefagi. You think this whole machlokas over there has anything to do with whether you could see a mum on Yom Tov? The kanasa pligi. They argue whether or not we place a kanas on this individual. The Yomi Rabba bar Chana Omer Rabbi Yochanan, but dukan shiba'ayin kol yamu pligi the asim mishum demas nisim. When it comes to a cataract or something wrong with the eye, there's no question everyone's going to hold the same thing. Says Rashi, Afilu Rabbi Yehuda moided aser b'nei shemishtana la'achar misa. The color of the eye changes. The yesh doik shenira la'achar shchita mum kavua she'ilu re'elu lifnei shchita haya nira oiver. It's possible you could look at the animal while it's alive, and examine the eye, and it would be a mum over. After it dies, it has the appearance of a mum kavua. So that when it comes to a badukin shiva'ayin, everyone holds that certainly you cannot examine it first. You cannot examine it after it's dead, because you're not going to get a proper examination. Ki pligi b'mumin shibaguf. The question is when it comes to the other mumin. Rameir savar gazrina mumin shibaguf atu mumin shiva'ayin. Just like the Mumin Shaba'ayin, we don't want you can't examine after it's died. You're not going to get a proper psak if it's a Mum Oiver or Mum Kavua. So too when it comes to all Mumin, you also have to do it before the Shechita. Rabbi Yehuda Savar Lo Gazrina. Rabbi Yehuda says that we do not make such a gezerah. We don't make such a decree. And therefore, you're right. When it comes to a Mum on the body, when it comes to Beduk and Shiba'ayin, you're right, you have to do it before. But when it comes to the Shechita, you could do the Bedika even afterwards to say about the Mum. Our Mishnah could also prove, regarding to the Din of B'chayris, that the whole issue is a Gezerah. Says Rashi, Mishum Gezer Ka'asirle, the Kanasa Kanis Kadeshal Yargel Oid, so you shouldn't be accustomed to doing this, that you should do it, you end up doing it afterwards. The Tanir Amer Oimer Hoyel Nishchat Shlo al Pi Mumcha Aser Shmamina Kanasu the Kokana Shmamina. The very language says, since you shechted it without an expert there, in other words, you shechted it before it was examined, so therefore it's really a kanas. It doesn't sound like it's mamish a problem. The point is that it's a kanas that you shouldn't have done it that way. Okay. Fine. So Ami v'ra dine chazi buchra de benesia. So these individuals, says Rashi, no haya v'al shem v'radim haya nikra. Okay, they're named after these like flowers or something. Havi b'yom etayva loy havi chazi. So on Yom, he showed it to them to be examined. It was Yom Tov, he didn't want to show it to him. Also, he went to Rav Ami. It's good that he didn't see it. It's good that he didn't examine whether it was a mum kavu or mum oiver, because you're not supposed to examine them on Yom Tov. Eini Rav Ami goofy chazi, but Rav Ami himself did. So what are you talking about? How could he say it was a good thing that they didn't check? Rav Ami himself checked. Rav Ami ki chazi me'esmo havi chazi. The truth is, he actually examined whether it was a mum kavua from Erev Yom Tov before. As we continue to Chav Zayin Mebez, it'll be Yom Tov shili komashil. And then on Yom Tov, he was again being asked, Hechi havi uvda, what's the case? And that's it. Says Rashi, Pamim shahaya tarid b'Erev Yom Tov. He was actually a little bit busy and preoccupied before Yom Tov. Umeshira hamumin, so he did see the mumin. Oimerlo lech achshav uvol macher. He said, "Come tomorrow." Vayishalo al mum ich boloi v'neish nichshadu kohanim al b'chayra salhatam hamum. So, but the reality is that he actually did see the mum, but because there was an element of tircha, so therefore a lack of time. So the fact is, the original one was really acceptable. Fine. V'yomtiv shuli kamashal hechi havi uvda. Kihadahu gavra, just like the case of a certain person who happened to be a kohen. The isi bochul kamed Rava. He brought the animal in front of Rava. Afni demali yoyim atava, and it was right before Yom Tov. The havi Yosef Rava v'ka chayv reshe. He was getting ready for Yom Tov. He was cleaning his hair. Dali eine. He lifted up his eyes, v'chazia l'mume, and he looked briefly at the mum. Armali zila in the v'tal machar. He said, "Come back tomorrow." Ki yasal machar armar hechi yavi uvda. And he said that this is so and so is the din. So the question is, how is he able to do that? L'chayra, he was examining it on Yom Tov. The answer is that he actually looked at it before, and he only just asked him to bring it back just as precautionary. But the reality is, it was perfectly fine. Armale havi shadyin sari b'hakdisa. Those people that would take barley on this side, the hoots of a fence, v'havi ihu b'idaf gisa, and then they would put the animal on the other side. V'hadi the boilo mechel, at the time when it wants to eat. Ail reisha, it sticks its head. Upratya hutza l'savoseha, and all of a sudden thorns get stuck into its lips and it gets bruised. So in other words, what the Kohanim would do, because they would obviously want the Bechor to get a mum, so they would deliberately inflict these mumin on these animals, which a person is not supposed to do. If it has a mum, it has a mum. But you're not supposed to purposely inflict a mum on this animal to make it defective. Armulei dilma ad garmut said, maybe you caused it. Armulei lo, no, I didn't have anything to do with it. So mana tamur de grama aser. So what's the problem? Even if, let's say, he only did grama, he didn't actually inflict it directly, but he did this indirect way. It's mashma from this that you can't even do hagrama to make it a mum. The sanya mum lo yeboy, ainli ela shelo yebo mum. That you can't directly make a blemish. Menayin shelo yigrum loy al yidei davar acher. You can't make it through some other means, an indirect form. For example, shel yavav betzek o devela. You shouldn't put, let's say, dough v'yanichlo al gabi ha'oizim on its ear Kedeshiyabu hakel v'yitlenu, and then all of a sudden the dog's going to come and bite the ear, which of course will cause a permanent bruise on the ear. Tashima kol mum. So it says kol mum, which is mashma that you can't even do it alidei hagrama. Omer mum v'yomer kol mum. Okay, let's look at Rashi. At garmale medas, with your intent, nasata hasoirim sham, you put the barley there. Shenich shantem al b'chayros mipnei tarach gadol b'yitzia shehuto olav sheYisrael enu metapel boy el shloisha chadashim v'nais l'kayin. Okay, fine. Let's see the next Mishnah. Behema shemesa. You have an animal that died, and so let's see if we have a question over here. Question 13, actually. Question 13. Be'ez oifen kuliyam amoidim. What does everyone agree? Shashaychit b'chor. That if you shechted the firstborn animal, v'yakach hera, and then you showed it to a chacham to see if it's a mum, aser, umatam. So he said when it comes to badukin shiva ayin, mishum shenishtanul achar misa, and therefore doing the examination after the shechita doesn't accomplish anything. Now let's see the Mishnah. Behema shemesa. So you have, let's say, for example, a healthy animal, and then it just suddenly dies on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to move it from its place because it's muksa, because you had no intention that it was going to die and that you weren't going to feed it to your animals because, again, you thought it was a healthy animal. Umasam, the story, the sholas Rav Tarfin Havial Hachala Shenitmus. So he had a question regarding the case we just talked about, this healthy animal that died suddenly, as well as Chal, which became tummy on Yom Tov. The Nichlas Medrash V'Shalu, the question was posed. You're not allowed to move them. Again, they are considered to be muksa, says Rashi. The fact that it became tamei, the schala, is not fit now to be given to the kohen. Because eating it is always aser. Let's say maybe you want to give it to your dog on Yom Tov, is aser. Din mavirin kachim tamei and min ha'olam b'Yom Tov. You're not allowed to burn kachim even though it's tamei on Yom Tov. The Karmelon in sarfin kachim b'Yom Tov, as we see in the second paragraph of Masechta Shabbos. So leimatanan stam adolokar Shimon. L'chayra, this mission is not like the sheet of Rav Shimon. Who is Rav Shimon? The famous statement of Rav Shimon Omer, a person is allowed to cut up gourds in order to give them to your animal. And it's not considered like a tircha shalit sarach. Yes, and the veil lifnei klavim. And Rav Shimon says you can give a nevela, an animal that dies, and you can feed your dogs. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo, no. Rabbi Yehuda Omer imo haisa nevela me'erev Shabbos asura. That if it didn't die from before, then it's aser. Because if it was alive, so you didn't have intention to give it to your dogs, which sounds like our Mishnah. Rav Shimon does not sound like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that if an animal dies on Yom Tov, that you're not allowed to move it. It's muksa. But he says clearly over here that you can cut it up, b'chadachin, es an avel ifnei klavim. So if you'll take Rav Shimon, Moed Rav Shimon, b'bali chayim shemesu. When we talk, Rav Shimon will agree. We're talking about an animal that dies, shasurin. In other words, a healthy animal, which is what our Mishnah is talking about. A healthy animal that no one in a million years would have thought it was going to die today, and it dies. So even Rav Shimon will say that that animal is considered a muksa. So that's good if you hold like that opinion, that Rav Shimon is murdered by a healthy animal that dies, that it's muksa. That Rav Shimon says that it's mutter even by a healthy animal, it's considered not to be muksa. So how would our Mishnah possibly be like the sheet of Rav Shimon? So if we say that our Mishnah is talking about behemoths kachim, so when it comes to behemoths kachim, says Rashi, shasur bahana. So an animal that dies, it's going to be a carbon ola, and almost then just dies on its own, so you can't feed it to your dogs. There's nothing you can do about it. It's definitely also bahana. But to a kavura, it has to be buried, said Rashi. Ve'enu niftis, it can't be redeemed. The boy hamad of haracha, inami ein poidin kachim lahachal klavim. We don't do a padilla for kachim so that you can now take that animal and then give it over to your dogs. So So even Rav Shimon will hold, at least when it comes to kachim. Maybe when it comes to a healthy animal, it's a machlokas. When it comes to an animal that's kachim, then certainly a person is not allowed to use it, and therefore it's certainly muksa. It compares it to a case of impure challah. So our Mishnah is talking about an animal, just like the challah is holy, is sanctified, so too this animal. And that's why Rosh Shimon can actually be like our Mishnah. Elataima de Kedisha. The whole reason why you can't do it is tafka because it's kodesh. Hadachu and sharia. Therefore, if it's just a regular animal, healthy or not, it's not muksa. So anichol marbered Rabbi Yosef Mishmei the Rabba. Rabbi Shimon that he always says any animal is okay, so therefore you can make that diuk that only an animal that's kaddish, does Rabbi Shimon say, is muksa. However, any animal that's chulin is mutter, is not muksa. How would you make such a diuk of our Mishnah? So hakamai skinan b'mesukenes v'divrei hakol. Maybe our Mishnah is talking about a situation where it's mesukenes, the case of mesukenes, the divrei hakol. If we're talking about an animal that is sickly and dying, then everyone will be of the opinion that that animal is not muksa. Fine. So let's just see that. Let's just finish the Amud. Ein nimnin al behemel chatchil b'yamtiv. So what does that mean? You can't join a group on Yom Tiv to buy an animal. Ella aval nimnin aleham erev Yom Tiv v'sheichnim mechalkin beinehem. But what you could do is you could get a group together before Yom Tiv and then divide it all together on Yom Tiv. So my ein nimnin. So again, what is this whole notion again about gathering up as a group and together on Yom Tiv, that we don't allow it? So Omar Yehuda Mishmol in Poiskin Damin L'Chatchila Al Behema B'Yom Tiv. A person is not allowed to discuss monetary issues regarding this animal. So Hechi Avid. So Omar Rab, maybe Shtei Behemos, take two animals. Umamidin Zu Eitzel Zu, put one next to the other. Virmazu Kazu, and say this one is just like this one. In other words, instead of talking about the value of how much this animal costs, take another animal that's basically of the same amount. Take care of, do the shechita of this first one, and the hakrava or whatever it is you're part of this group for. And then, after Yom Tiv, you can now look at that other animal, and you can make the cheshbonos that way. Tani mehachi lo yomer adam l'chavero. A person should not say, a person wants to again join a group, hareini imcha b'sela, hareini imcha b'shtayim, I'm going to be a partner for this group for a dollar or a couple of dollars worth of this animal. We don't talk about actual money. You can say that I am for a certain percentage of the animal, a quarter or a third or a half, whatever it is, and then you could settle all the costs and the finances after Yom Tov. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's see a couple more questions. Question 14. Eiz behema shemesa, one animal that dies, will kul yom havi muksa. So that everyone will say is kachim. Behemoth's kachim is definitely muksa. Eiz behema shemesa kul yom ena muksa. So that is if an animal is mesukenes, because since it was in on the throes of death, it was going to die, and it was banished shemashas, it's not muksa because you had das that this animal's probably going to die, and there's a good chance that you're going to actually eat it on Yom Tov. Question TA2. Behema, these are almost all the same questions. Behema shemesa b'Shabbos, Mosai kuliyam havi muksa, kachim. Mosai kuliyam loy havi muksa is if it's mesukenes, which is exactly the same question as question 14. TB 4. Behema nisnavlu b'Yom Tov, almost the exact same question. Eza oifen mutersa kuliyam b'tiltel. In mesukenes. Eza oifen asur kuliyam b'tiltel. Behema kachim. The same question is just written in different orders. Adkan.